My name's Adam McLaughlin, and this is the Church Marketing Ideas Podcast. Practical ideas to help your church build trust in your community. Welcome to the Church Marketing Ideas Podcast, episode 13. You can track down all of the show notes today at churchmarketingideas.com/013. All the notes from my conversation with Kyler Nixon are going to be right there, churchmarketingideas.com/013. And while you're at churchmarketingideas.com, if you go and add /YouTube, so churchmarketingideas.com/YouTube, then that will take you to our YouTube channel where we've put a whole bunch of questions and answers that we've gotten from the podcast, and our guests question and answer our interviews in little tiny snippets, so that if you're looking for a specific question or a specific idea, you can track it down really quickly without having to look through the entire podcast. Or if you have a volunteer or your pastor or somebody asks you a question and you like how one of the guests has answered the question, you can just send them the snippet from YouTube. So go to churchmarketingideas.com/YouTube and you'll find our whole library of videos there where you can get all of the little questions and answers, all the topics that we've chatted about on the Church Marketing Ideas Podcast. At the end of the show today, somebody's asked a question about how can I help my pastor make quicker decisions? Do you ever feel like leadership isn't making decisions as quickly as you need them made? Well, there's a few ways that you can help them and work together with them to help them make some quicker decisions. So that's coming up at the end of the podcast. But first, my interview with Kyler Nixon. As a Story Brand certified guide, Kyler helps churches create memorable brands, effective websites, and clear marketing so they can reach more people. Kyler is from beautiful Madison, Wisconsin, but serves organizations all across the country. Learn more about Kyler at kylercreative.com or on Instagram at kylercreative. Now, a message from our sponsors, and then my interview with Kyler Nixon. Hey everybody, the church conference is coming up March 5th in Jacksonville, Florida. This is a one-day event put on by Mark McDonald, the author of Be Known for Something, as well as myself. We're putting on this one-day conference to help you in your church communications job in the most practical ways possible. So the easiest way to sign up is go to churchconference, churchconference.com. Use coupon code ADAM to save $10 off your ticket, and we'll see you March 5th in Jacksonville, Florida. What up, Kyler Nixon?
Adam, my
How's it
favorite
going,
person
man?
ever.
Well,
Second favorite, but whatever.
Yeah, you should be careful.
I know, my wife's like around probably, I don't know.
Dude, hailing from Madison, Wisconsin. Tell us what you've been up to lately.
There's lovely snow on the ground. I've been shoveling a lot of snow, drinking a lot of root beer, eating a lot of brats and cheese, just, Wisconsin things.
All the Wisconsin things.
Yeah, no, it's been cool just working with a lot of businesses and churches as a story brand guide. And like I was telling you before we hopped on, my wife and I just bought a house. So this has been a pretty crazy process and living life. So it's been good.
It's exciting, and I'm really looking forward to what we're going to be chatting about today, which is removing risk for our church visitors. And I think sometimes we don't even realize as churches that there is some associated risk, or at least a perceived risk, when our visitors are thinking about coming to visit us. So help our listeners understand kind of what that risk looks like and why it exists.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I'll tell a quick story. So like Adam mentioned, I live in Madison, but my wife and I lived in Phoenix for the last 4 years. And so we had a great church down there that we were a part of. And, you kind of like when you're in church, if you've attended church for a long time, especially the same one, you're like, just kind of get comfortable with it, right? Like it's easy to go on Sundays. You see the same people, the routine. There's not much risk for me, like deciding to go to my church that I'm a regular attender of. Well, when we moved up here to Madison, we were trying to find a great church to go to. And I was like, really like, I'd go into these churches and I was like really like nervous to walk in for the first time. And I'm like, this is so weird. Like I grew up in church. I visited dozens of churches. Like I work with churches. Like I should not be like nervous. Like I know the drill, but there's just this inherent risk of giving somebody, an hour and a half of my time at church, an hour and a half of my time, and kind of being vulnerable in their community, like allowing myself to risk going into that community.
Right.
And so really what this stemmed from when we were kind of chatting about what we might talk about is just like, how can we remove that risk for our churches? Like, because you have to understand, whether you realize it or not, people are taking a risk by attending your church, by planning a visit, by bringing their kids and dropping their kids off at your kids ministry, by even sitting in the back row of your church, or standing during worship, or whatever those things might be. Like, these are all questions. They're all challenges that people are wrestling with. And so we need to talk about how can we remove that risk and make it as easy as possible for people to come to our church and attend a Sunday morning with us.
Yeah, and I think that sometimes as churches, we kind of lose track of what it's like to be a guest. And
Exactly.
we can imagine what that's like, and we could pretend, and we can walk through, and we can go visit another church. But, there is an associated risk. So out of the church world, if you took the thought process of what if you were going to visit a restaurant for the first time? Well, the risk is you could take friends and it's a bad experience. Now they don't trust your recommendation, or the food's not great, or it ends up being more expensive.
Or they tell you you're going to hell because of your sin.
Yeah, I mean, that's
a risk.
An option. There's risk, right?
Exactly.
And so there is, whenever we're dealing with a new business or a new organization, there's inherent risk, and we have to realize it's not up for discussion. There is a perceived risk with somebody coming to visit your church.
Mm-hmm.
So
exactly.
So tell us a little bit about what is the first step in removing this perceived or this inherent risk when somebody's coming to visit your church?
Well, I think step number one in our rehabilitation process is realizing that there is a risk, right? No, I'm just kidding. But I think seriously though, is just acknowledging that there's risk. So you could say, we've made our church really welcoming. We've trained all of our staff, and we, our church is really clean. It does this. We have a great kids ministry. I don't care. Like, none of that stuff matters. You could have the best church in the world and there's still a risk. So I think the first step is ultimately just acknowledging that people are feeling that, like they're taking a risk by attending church at your church on Sunday morning. The next step, I think, is giving people a clear plan. So just acknowledging that they are going through that and say, okay, look, we're going to make this easy for you. We're going to show you how simple it is to come on a Sunday morning. I'm a story brand guide. So if you're familiar with the story brand framework created by Donald Miller, there's a part of that framework that talks about giving people a plan to move forward with us. It's a 3-step process plan. Think about Dora the Explorer, a great example of this, right? First, we're going to cross the bridge, and then we're going to do that. And then third, we're going to do that. What is that plan for your potential attender? First, hey, tell us that you're coming. Second, pull into the parking lot and turn on your hazard lights so that we know you're new. And then third, maybe that's experience community at our church or whatever that is. Just say, look, we know that this is a little scary and that's all right. But here's how easy it is to move forward with us. Maybe for your kids ministry, removing risk for getting a kid checked in. So step 1 is give us your child's information. That's sounds like a little demanding, but tell us your child's name and their age. Second, we'll give you a tour of our kids space so that you can see how clean it is, how safe it is. We'll let you meet your child's instructor. And then third, pick them up after service. What is that process plan for them? How does that actually work? So I would say that's the kind of step 1A is giving people a plan.
Yeah, and I think that, the way you've broken it down with those 3 steps, it makes it really manageable. So if somebody's visiting your website, it's really easy to tell them, show up 15 minutes early, find somewhere to park in the VIP section, and take your kids to their check-in location, right? You're not going to give them all 27 steps of visiting your church before they show up. But if you gave them an ABC, it's enough that they understand what's coming, but it's also enough that it's bite-sized that they can kind of wrap their brain around, oh yeah, okay, I pull into the parking lot, I find the visitors parking, and I take my kids inside.
Yeah. Exactly. And then you can train your team to come alongside of them, and or use signage is another great way to do this if we're talking about, Sunday morning experience, where they pull into the parking lot, and then there's signage, or there's parking team members that say, okay, guest parking this way, right? And they'll point them where they need to go. You didn't need to tell them to follow the signs. Like, that's what your team is for. That's what your church can help with, is giving them, that, okay, go from step 1 to step 2, and here's the steps in between step 1 and step 2. Maybe that's, once you park, head inside and find your seat. Well, you use signage in your auditorium, to get people to your auditorium, or whatever that looks like. I would just map out 3 steps, and then you internally can kind of fill in the blanks and say, okay, how do we get them from step 1 to step 2? What are the steps that we need to take, as a guest services team, as a church, to kind of move people through that next step?
Yeah, and I love the supposition that people are going to be trying to find out about you before they show up. Like, I think we have to realize that, just like a restaurant or just like a retailer,
Yep.
people are visiting your church website before they're even going to come to visit your church.
Great. Yep.
And so to give them those steps in a really clear way about how to, what it's going to seem like ahead of that visit. But also, I think it creates trust.
Right.
Like you say,
Right,
these are going to be
sure.
the 3 steps, and then those 3 steps happen. We are able to create trust.
Yeah, and you have to follow it, right? Like, you have to tell them what you're going to tell them, and then do it. Like, it's not pull into the parking lot, and our one of our team members will be there to take you to guest parking, and then there's nobody out there. Like, you have to actually do what you're going to say. And you brought up a good point too about people checking us out on our website and kind of building trust there. One of the other ways that we can remove risk is by showing our church. Like, you can show them things through images, not just written words, but taking photos that are not stock photos, demonstrating what do people look like at our church? What are they wearing? Like, that's how you remove risk for people. And I guess that's kind of a good segue into step 2. That is just tell them the agreements that you're trying to do. Just take out a piece of paper, split it in half. On the left, put objections, and on the right, put agreements. This is, I do this with a lot of businesses, but it applies for churches as well. So an objection is any reason somebody would have to not come to church, or to your church specifically. So things like, I'm going to be expected to give my first time, or I'm not going to be able to know where I'm going, or I'm not going to fit in, or I have to wear a suit and a tie, or, there's probably hundreds, literally, of objections that somebody could make on Sunday morning as to why they shouldn't come. So then what you do is you list the objections, and on the line right next to it, on the other side of that column, you will then put your agreement. So if somebody says, I'm worried that, I'm going to have to give, we say, we don't ask first-time guests to give. I'm going to have to wear a suit and a tie. You can wear whatever you're comfortable in, right? So list those agreements out, and then either demonstrate those through images, or, an FAQs page is a great place to put that. I have a site where we literally just put 12 check marks of you don't have to dress up. We don't expect you to give. It's okay to laugh at church. This is a safe place for kids. So any way that you can demonstrate that, whether through written word or video and images, is a great way to remove risk.
Yeah, and so when you're talking about how are we creating those agreements, or how are we coming up with the list of the objections, what's the way that we can kind of get outside the box that we're in and see this perspective from a visitor's viewpoint?
Yeah, I mean, I would just ask, right? I would hope and assume that you probably have some unsaved friends, or friends that don't go to your church. Tell them, you'll trade them a Starbucks gift card for them to ask any concerns that they would have with attending church, or go knock on your neighbor's door and say, hey, do you go to church? I'm not about to invite you, but I would love to know what has prevented you from going to a church, or what are some concerns that you have with church. I think a lot of these you can think through naturally. I think you can kind of empathize with people and kind of put yourself in their shoes. But I would just ask, even if you get familiar with a first-time guest, or if you become friends with somebody who's new to church, just ask them hey, what were some of the objections that you had to coming to church? What were some things that you were worried about? And that's a great way, just listening to people. The other thing too is just looking at data and research. Barna is a great, place to start for that. This is what people are worried about. I'm sure they have a study on that somewhere. And then identifying the objections that people have based on literally just listening and asking.
Yeah. And I think some of those things make sense to, or have to be filtered through the framework of who is your target audience, right? Who is that person that's coming to your church, and what are they looking for? What are they concerned about? And how can you help them meet that need.
Right.
So
Yeah,
what's the
exactly. I think you're
third
spot on.
step in that process?
Yeah. So the third step is going to be giving people a single next step. We talked about giving them a plan, but then we also want to give people a next step. So I want you to kind of think about these a little bit independently, but they also kind of end up coming together. So for instance, on your website, what's the next step that you're giving people? It's not learn more. It's not get started. It's not, a range of other things. It's what is the single most important thing that we want you to do? Tell me. So that's plan a visit, right? And then once they've planned their visit, maybe you follow up in an email and it's, hey, show up on Sunday. And then when they pull into the parking lot, it's, if you're new, turn on your hazards, right? What are those next steps? Give them a single next step. Don't give them a bunch of different things that they need to do. You can follow that plan, right? Like we talked about a 3-step plan to kind of give an overview, but what is the next step that we want them to take? And maybe we're not just talking about first-time attenders. Maybe we're talking about second-time attenders as well. Like maybe we want to turn those first-timers into second-timers. So their next step is, hey, attend pastor's meet and greet after service, or stop by the welcome booth for, some more information, or whatever that is for your church. You need to give people a clear, tangible next step. A great analogy of this at the StoryBrand Live workshop, Don Miller teaches about calls to action and next steps. And he'll go on stage and he'll say, all right, everybody, I want you to meet me outside on the corner. And so everybody gets up and they go outside and they stand on the corner, and Don Miller gets on a little podium with a bullhorn and he says, people go where you tell them to go. Everybody back inside. And then everybody goes back inside. And that's the whole point, right? Like people go where you tell them to go. They'll do what you tell them to do. So we need to give people a clear next step so that they know, okay, this is what's next. That helps me remove risk. There's no fog around what's happening next.
Yeah, and the next step is an interesting thing, that you can visit a restaurant for the first time and you understand restaurants that have figured this out, because they know, they have the please wait to be seated sign, and then it makes sense. Like somebody shows up with your drink, and the next person shows up with your ready to order the food, and all those steps along the way. And you can also probably instantly think of businesses that have got this wrong, where it's just so unclear, and you're wandering around and you're walking in and looking around. Where do I stand? Where do I order? And I think that churches need to really kind of embrace some of these strategies that businesses have embraced to figure out what is that process for a guest.
Yeah, totally. There's a book, I forget the author's name, but it's called Find Your Yellow Tux. And this guy basically, he owns a single A, like a college club baseball team, basically. And it's the lowest level. It's not professional. It's like the lowest level, right? And so it's like, would I go sold out all 4,000 seats of their every season for the last few seasons, right? And it's because he doesn't put on a baseball game. He puts on, it's entertainment. Like it's fun for the family. It's all this kind of stuff. When people ask him, like other baseball teams might call him and say, hey, can we come and shadow you and see what you're doing? He always says that, why would you go and look at, for churches, a great example, why would you go look at other churches and what other churches are doing? I mean, that's helpful to some extent, but if you want to find out a really great guest services process, go to a business that nails guest services, that makes you feel super welcome. Go stay at a hotel that's a little out of your price range, right? Go on a cruise, whatever that is. I mean, you don't have to necessarily drop a bunch of money, but analyze some of these businesses that are doing things really well, because they have the money to do market research, right? They have the money to kind of figure some of these things out. So you can piggyback off of those concepts, or just think personally, when was the last time I had a really great experience and what made it great? When was the last time I had a really poor experience and what made it poor? When was the last time I was worried about trying something new and why was I worried about it? All of these things can influence how we talk to people and ultimately help remove risk from them coming to our church.
Okay, one more time, Kyler. Give us the 3 steps to reducing risk when somebody comes to visit your church.
Yeah. Step 1 is going to be, let me back up. Step 1, acknowledge that there's risk, right? Step 1A is going to be create a plan, whatever it is. So whether that's them coming to your church, whether it's them checking into your kids' ministry, whether that's becoming a member of your church, whether that's giving, create a plan. And I would say limit that to 3 steps, a 3-step plan. The next is going to be overcome objections with agreements. So like we talked about, list out your objections, and then what are the agreements that your church is making to overcome them. And then third is going to be give people a really clear and practical next step that they can actually take.
So why do you think it is that churches miss these steps? Like, why isn't this just built into how we think naturally about a process?
Yeah. I don't know. It's a good question. I think that it really comes down to this concept of the curse of knowledge, where we are so familiar with our church that we have a hard time understanding that people aren't close to our church and they don't understand it the same way that we do, right? The curse of knowledge basically says you're operating at a 9 or a 10 knowledge level of your church. And when you try to explain that to somebody, when you invite them to church or whatever, you explain it at a 6 or a 7, you might need to simplify it a little bit. But the problem is people understand things at a 1 or a 2 knowledge level. So how can we get away from that curse of knowledge and then ultimately, just be aware that there's a problem there? Because when you're aware that there's a problem, you can fix it. But most churches, I think, tend to kind of operate under this, well, why aren't they coming? Or why is this happening? Well, there's inherent risk. And like, if you don't understand that and don't recognize that, you can't solve that as a problem. So I would say that that's probably the biggest thing, is just not fully understanding kind of where your visitor is at.
And so we know that website is that first kind of precursor to even creating these steps, right? If we're going to if we're going to provide information for somebody before they even visit, that's going to happen on their website. So tell me, what is the thing that you see with church websites? Because I know you've also designed quite a few. What is the thing that you see with church websites, the easiest tweak that someone could make to their church website and see the biggest difference?
Yeah, I'll give you 2, even though you asked for 1. So the first one I would say is images. Like, I think if you didn't have anything on your site but service times and, a button to plan a visit or find directions or something like that, I think images speak louder than any words can. And, you need to ask questions like, people are asking questions and you need to answer them through your images. Like, what do I wear? What's the music like? How big is this place? Am I going to fit in? The other way to ask that is, do people look like me? Right.
Right.
So you need to ask those questions and then have your images influence that. Like, just be aware that images have a huge impact. And then I think the other thing is just calling it what it is, like answering questions on your site. Like, I'm a big fan of putting like FAQs on a visit page or in an email after somebody has planned their visit, and just say it bluntly. Like, am I going to be expected to give? No, you will not. Or yes, you will. Or, if you'd like to give, you can, or whatever that answer is. What do I wear? Just answer it. Don't try to get like cute with it. Like, do I need to dress as like, no, just say it, say what it is. So I would say images, and then just straight up naming those objections with like frequently asked questions or, a body of text or something, are the 2 biggest things that churches can do right now that have the biggest impact.
Yeah. And I love the thought of the opportunity for somebody to plan a visit and then get a follow-up email. I think that's a really good thought, because they might have, plan their visit on Tuesday or Wednesday. They might have browsed the website. Right. They click the plan a visit button, and then a follow-up email on Saturday morning says, hey, we're looking forward to getting to meet you tomorrow. Here's a few things you might want to know. And then here are the 3 steps.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it all ties together. I mean, if you want a really quick outline of what I would recommend churches to do, get your website squared away in a way that's easy to follow and easy to understand. From there, if somebody wants to plan a visit, there's some great plan a visit softwares out there. Church Hero has a really great one. Text in Church has an awesome plan a visit software that you can integrate into your website. So once they do that, plan a visit, I would generally recommend doing that beyond just getting information. Like, try to have them make some type of connection with you via email or something like that. So they give their email address maybe on a Tuesday, like you said. Well, as soon as they do that, send them an email saying, hey, we're so excited to see you this weekend. Here's the details of our service, just time, location, right? And then on Friday, Saturday, that's where I would follow up with, maybe subject line, 5 things you need to know about our church tomorrow or your visit tomorrow, something like that. And then name those things out. Here's what you should wear, whatever you feel comfortable in. Or maybe you have a more formal church and you should wear, slacks and a button-up shirt or whatever that is for your church. You will not be expected to give. Here's how you check your kid in. Step 1, step 2, step 3, right? And just name those things out. And then when they come, follow through with those things. And you can even address them from stage too, if you wanted to get kind of crazy with it, is like, hey, if this is your first time, we're really glad that you're here today during our service. Here's what you can expect. Put that in your worship guide or your bulletin or whatever you want to call it. Our music today is going to be modern. Our music today is going to be contemporary, traditional, which just means we're going to have an organ and a choir. You're welcome to participate as you like. Our sermon is going to be this and that, right? Remove risk for people even during the service. So I think that's a pretty easy flow that most churches can utilize that doesn't take a lot of time to set up, and you don't have to, overcomplicate it really.
Yeah, and we've talked about how to remove the risk when we're communicating and the things that people want to know when they're planning a visit to our church. But I think internally, what you're practically saying is let them know what to expect and then follow through on that in the way you told them to expect it.
Exactly. Yeah. Don't make it a secret. Like it's not a secret. I'm always just it's so weird to me when someone's like, am I expected to give? And it's like a 4-paragraph answer on giving and biblical precedent. Like, no, just answer the question. Like, don't make it a secret. You just tell them what it is and then do what you've just told them.
So, Kyler, we're going to put links to that blog post that we're basing this off of in the show notes and some of those other tools that you mentioned. But tell me a little bit about what you do when a church hires you to help them clarify their message through the StoryBrand framework.
Yeah. So this is a really great process for churches. I think it just helps you really talk about the problems that your church solves, right? Like, why are we here? I think it's like where that comes down to. And so what I do is I partner alongside of churches through either video like we're doing now or meeting in person, and we'll take your church through the StoryBrand process and we'll identify what are people looking for in your community? What problems are they having getting that? How have you been positioned as the guide in your community to help those people? What is the plan, like we talk about here? What is the call to action that we want to give people? And then ultimately, how are we helping them avoid failure in their lives and then end in success that God has for them? And then we will talk about practical applications. So how do we implement this new message on your website? How do we implement this in your service? How do we implement this in an email campaign? And so that's what I really enjoy working with churches on.
And if a church wants to learn more about working with you and the StoryBrand framework, how can they connect with you, Kyler?
So they can go to adammclaughlin.net and then send Adam a message that says, please connect me with Kyler. No,
that's not true.
You can go to Kyler. Yeah, the link on his page that says hire Kyler.
Right.
No, so you can go to Kyler, which is KYLER creative.com, and then start a project in the top right corner.
That's cool. And if they want to connect with you personally on social media or wherever, where's your favorite social network?
Yeah. I'm taking like a break right now. So probably when this airs, I'll probably be back on everything, but probably the easiest is Instagram, at Kyler Creative. And I'd be happy to help with anything, or even if you just had some questions on any of this stuff, I'm happy to talk with the people.
Cool, man. Well, thank you so much for hanging out today, Kyler. I love having you on, and I can't wait to have you on next time again. And we'll talk probably about more silly things before we cut to the chase. But love having you on, and I love hanging out.
Dude, love you, man. Come to Madison. We'll get some more mac and cheese.
I can't wait. We'll see you soon.
All right, thanks.
Thanks, man. Hey everybody, the church conference is coming up March 5th in Jacksonville, Florida. This is a one-day event put on by Mark McDonald, the author of Be Known for Something, as well as myself. We're putting on this one-day conference to help you in your church communications job in the most practical ways possible. So the easiest way to sign up is go to churchconference, churchconference.com. Use coupon code ADAM to save $10 off your ticket, and we'll see you March 5th in Jacksonville, Florida.
Hi, Adam. How do I get my pastor to actually make a quick decision? It seems like I'm always waiting before we can move forward, and nothing is a simple yes or no.
you're not alone in this question. You're not alone in the fact that sometimes pastors don't make quick decisions. And I know this is sometimes a personality thing, and that's totally fine. You need to understand the personality of your pastor and work with them. What I would recommend doing is figuring out what is the next step in this decision and offering to contribute to that next step. Now, that could sound cliche or that could sound trite, but that's not really what it needs to be. It could be something like, hey, so I think our next step would be to find out if A or B makes the most sense. Can I look into that and get back to you in a couple days, right? So rather than having to have them make a decision about that thing, how can you move the ball down the field? How can you take a few next steps to get you closer to making a decision? And so the conversation isn't, should we do this, yes or no? But the conversation is, hey, can I look into that for you and get back to you in a couple days with our options so we can figure out how to move forward from there. So that is the best way that I've found to help leaders make a decision if they're not making a quick decision. Simply say to them, hey, this seems like the next step in this process. Can I look into that for you and get you some options? So that's what I would recommend. Go for it. I think you see a big difference. And if you have a question, just go to churchmarketingideas.com, click the button that says ask a question. I promise I'll respond to every single question that comes in, and some of them will be featured on our podcast.